Hello and welcome to another episode of Zelf on the Shelf. My name is Tanner and
welcome back to another episode of us monetizing our hyperfixations, because I just think it's funner as a group. It's been so much fun diving into Bethany and Dave with 77,000 of you. I just think it goes without saying that whether or not we'll be making this video, we'd be spending 50 minutes watching this video, so might as well make it a community event. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing great. I'm dressed in my goth co's core, just sitting back.
Hygge season is coming, as we've been saying.
It's nigh upon us.
And you should buy our candle.
It's made with our literal blood.
Yeah, our
what little adrenochrome we have left, sweat of our glands, and it smells delicious. Your home will be full of what the Swedes call which is just heaven on earth. You're gonna love it.
Real talk. It's banana, nut bread, and coconut. It's a soy blend. Every candle you buy plants a tree. That's enough about the candle.
Oh, I was gonna say one more thing.
Unless Tana has another thing.
I genuinely don't like plugging stuff unless I really
really good,
feel it,
yeah.
and it is really good. I remember when you had your open house party, and people were literally being like, "What is this smell?"
Yeah.
And we're like, "You're never gonna believe it's our."
I've got so much feedback that it really is the best smelling candle.
It's worth the price.
It really is. We don't have to get into it.
We don't have to do this.
But what we do have to get into is Bethany and Dave's marriage, because I'm fascinated. I just think it's a fascinating phenomenon that Christians who put marriage on such a pedestal and obviously don't have sex before marriage, as with girl defined, the whole justification for, gender roles and not having sex before marriage and all those things is that this type of Christian marriage is going to be the best marriage. Every other marriage pales in comparison. So then it's
if not
interesting.
Totally invalid.
Yeah, as with Mormonism, non-Mormon marriages, not really that real.
Not real.
Not real.
Pretend, play in house.
So I just think it's fascinating then to get to see so much of these people's marriage dynamics, unbeknownst to them, because I think they're so embedded in this culture that things that we are whoa, red flag in watching them communicate on screen, that's just so normal to them, for example, just jokes about the old ball and chain, and there's just a million ways that things kind of get embedded in culture so thoroughly that it's seen as just completely fine, even though it's
horrific.
Yeah.
I think about the things that I said. I remember one time, in early high school, coming out of adolescence, being you think I'm immature now? You should have seen me as a 13-year-old. The bullies had a case.
So true with me as well. The bullies, they were onto something.
I remember saying to some friends in the ward, girlfriends in the ward, oh, my wife is just going to be chained up in the kitchen. And then being that's not cool. And me being oh, girls are so fussy and hysterical. I just said I wanted to chain them up in the kitchen as a joke.
You've always had a knack for comedic timing.
Thank you. At the very least.
This is a video neither of us have seen yet. Obviously, I've been on Reddit and watching other people's reaction videos to Bethany and Dave, and there's so much.
We're totally matching them again.
Oh my god!
We've done it again.
Wow, we really are Bizarro World Them.
We are Bizarro World Them, which is also Bizarro World Barbie and Ken. It's all...
It's we have the same amount of romantic sexual connection as they do. So it's
If passion is a fire, theirs is even less than a Zelf candle.
So without further ado, do you want to...
Dive right into... Look, the first frame is already... That is a face of someone who hasn't been satisfied or had a full, coherent,
This was also pre-Barbie movie, Dave.
Oh, wow.
So he was not feeling seen yet.
Y'all, it's Bethany and Dave and Audrey. Hi, babe.
Hi. I'm really happy to be here.
He's really happy to be there.
Hello, my wife. I am very happy to see you here at the filming recording that we are doing today. I am very delighted, as always, by your presence. Shall we engage in intercourse, my wife?
Okay, tell us, how are you feeling to be here? It's been a while.
I'm feeling good to be here. Actually, really look forward to these.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
He's a bad boy. He's a little bad boy in him. I do like Dave a lot. I'm sorry. I'm already sorry for even insinuating that I have bad feelings toward Dave.
No.
Because I don't. I'm a big fan of Dave.
We are a Dave propaganda channel at this point. I think he enjoys these because he enjoys having a platform on which to speak. And I love that for him.
Yes, I think every white boy just needs a platform.
Every white boy needs
Now that I have blonde hair, I feel a kinship. I just know what the struggle is like.
We thought it would be fun to answer questions that are more like currently right now. How do we deal with things? How do we do things? How does Dave think about things? Less of always in the past, like what did we do when we were dating? What did we do when we were engaged? Which is fun, but it's cool, I think, to talk about where we are now. We're 4 years married. I would say we have grown and changed a lot in the last 4 years. So maybe let's start by just giving the last 6 months. I don't know, like a little recap of why we think we've changed so much. I don't know, you go for it.
I'm telling you, his eyes go from dissociating to like 1,000-yard stare to like, sorry, I'm just, lots happening.
Well,
lot to unpack.
This was, I think, 3 months ago, so around, maybe 4, but around the time that I think Dave went off Instagram, because he started being, he did like a live where, as I told you, he played a bunch of piano songs, including Hey Jude, and sung to them. He's adorable. And he talked in that about how he'd like suffered a lot from suicidal ideation, and one of the things that was most jarring that he said was specifically like part of the fantasy for him was imagining how bad Bethany would feel if he did kill himself. And I'm not certain, but it seems like Fundy Snark and like other people who have Fundy Fridays, sorry, who responded to that content, they all kind of had the message of like, hey Paul, like maybe it would be good to like be a bit less online, like you don't need to share everything with us. Sorry, Dave. And then he went off Instagram as far as I know. So which devastates me.
The old line, heterosexuality is a prison. I learned yesterday, or saw this video essay I was talking to you about earlier, where they were talking about the first instances of the usage of the word heterosexuality in like Webster and other dictionaries, measurements of language at different times. And the first mentions of heterosexuality are seen as like a hyper fixation on the opposite sex, like an unnatural, disordered, like, wow, this guy who's just like so obsessed with women and being heterosexual.
How did we get onto heterosexuality?
I feel like Christian, like the traditional Christian marriage is sort of the archetype of this heterosexual paradigm, which it's a social construct. It doesn't reflect human nature or even like what's best for us humans. It's just an idea that's been imposed largely on people and preying on people's fear mechanisms and their insecurities about death and community, etc. Just saying, this feels like that. This like heterosexuality as this like hyper concept that like the traditional family, the family that's been propagated by wasps for the last 400, 500 years. And it's easy to see how Christians have, mainstream Christians have characterized homosexuality as a temptation. That's like, everybody just kind of struggles with it. Satan will come after you with that one. And it's like, is everyone just being tempted, or is that just like who you are, and we can like healthily integrate that instead of like misinterpreting old Babylonian era myths about like we don't take sexual or romantic or relationship advice from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Why we do for the Bible is beyond me.
But we do take sex advice from the Song of Solomon. That's
we
what
do. I can't wait. I cannot wait for that reel.
Fuck it.
We're doing it now. Let's go down. Yes, I love a side quest.
Well, first of all, I just have a few reels I want to show Tanner and just generally. We've seen their first kiss at the altar before, but oh my God. It's like I can't. I've watched it so many times. Let's just watch this reel. 5 things you need to know about sex before your honeymoon. The way he looks like he's eating, it's too much. Like if you're doing your first, this is the real things you need to know before getting married as a Christian woman. If you're gonna do your first kiss at the altar, keep it simple, stupid. Kiss. Don't go for this whole like.
Oh no.
Don't do an advanced technique. Don't risk it. Just do like a simple lingering peck. Or it's just
you have to be able to like practice that before. You have to kiss before that moment. You have ridiculous. To. Otherwise, you look like 2 Muppets kissing for the first time.
That's exactly what they look like.
Honestly, the lingering heterosexuality that I have in my body, I just feel like receding into the innermost depths of my being. It is hard to believe in this kind of love watching. Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, God bless them. They got tricked, and right, they
Yeah.
realized that they got tricked, and that was foisted upon them against their will. They were, by conservative Republican definition, groomed into this, or shall we say, indoctrinated into a way of being that was not good for them individually or for their relationship.
So for those of you who don't know, Bethany is a sex coach now. She's selling a course on how Christian women can have better sex. I just loved this caption.
Should we sign up?
It's $169
Just 2 Christian women?
for the course.
Are you guys in?
Patreon.com/self on the shelf. You guys are going to have to seriously fund that because...
The coven is like, to what end?
Here are 10 super simple free ways to spice up your sex life. 1. Mirrors. Puts a new perspective on things. Great piece of advice. Remember when we
Mirrors on every...
We have a video where we talked about 4 things that have historically and some of them currently been banned in Mormon bedrooms, and mirrors was literally one of them at one point in time. Comments, questions?
I was just thinking about our last video about witches and how mirrors used to be seen as this magical device, obviously, because it's like a reflection of you and like...
Seeing
like,
reality
and consciousness.
Clearly. Witchcraft.
Yeah, and it has been a like shamanic and ritualistic tool for a lot of groups and mystics and things. Anyway, but here Christians are having sex in front of a mirror.
2. Blindfold and take turns exploring.
So fun.
3. Start in the shower.
So fun. Honestly,
4.
she's making some great points.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. 4. Wear old lingerie and tear it off each other. We love
Old
an
how
equally-
old? Like, what is she wearing? She's dressed like a pilgrim in this one, and she's wearing like a Victorian ghost night dress with like the
It's
little
funny,
caps,
huh?
like holding a candlestick. She's like, "Mom, I'm sleepy tonight."
But it's like the lingerie would have to be like still fresh and nice enough that you'd find it sexy, but for some reason old enough that you'd want to throw it away. I'm like, what would that line be? If it's still hot enough that that it gets you going with each other, then why would you want to ruin it?
That is a line. That is
It's a tough one. Maybe
You
just
almost-
poppers,
Yeah, invest in some cheaper ones right off the bat, maybe.
Sure. 5, have sex before your date night instead of after.
Have sex before the date night?
Yeah.
But then don't you just like lay down and cuddle and like tickle each other's backs and say like cute things to each other?
What's going to motivate you to go out after
Exactly.
that? 6, use a feather on erogenous zones. 7,
A single feather.
sounds like witchcraft to me. 7, have one night all about him and the next night all about her. Fine. 8, get super
Guys'
honest.
night.
Like most of these are fine. 8 is get super honest and share a fantasy with each other. 9 is read Song of Solomon and act it out.
I hate the biblical role play.
I really don't like the thought of that coming
till
into the
that one
bedroom.
single piece of poop at the end of the brownie, and then I was like, what have I eaten?
Yeah.
Song of Solomon roleplay? What? Is he like, hey, honey, I was thinking tonight you and 500 of my other wives and concubines could get together.
And then 10, which is just a funny one to imagine, is keep the lights on and your eyes open the entire time. Just thinking about the 1,000-yard stare. I get what they're going for with that one, but it's just funny.
Babe, you know you're not allowed to close your eyes. Look at me, babe. Look at me, babe.
Also, Bethany made this video called Sexual Compatibility is a Big Fat Lie. She looks like she's about to go snorkeling.
Sexual compatibility is such a lie. According to the top hit on Google, sexual compatibility is basically 2 partners that have the same sexual needs, the same sexual preferences, and the same sexual turns.
Okay, first of all, according to the first result on Google, but like, I don't think it's like everything being the exact same.
No,
I just
that's
think
not
it's
what
like
compatibility
complementary,
is.
yeah.
It's like, what? Even if 2 people start out sexually compatible, life changes, seasons change, having babies changes you.
She's making a great case for why marriage may not be.
The ideal institution, especially
Yeah.
for those not interested in child rearing.
being tired, job changes, stress, like all of that can change you, and that can change your compatibility if that's what you're basing like a great sex life on. If you marry someone based off of your sexual compatibility, what do you do when life changes, things change, and sex isn't as compatible as it was when you first...
You adapt, you explore, you open up your relationship.
It's just funny because sexual compatibility has clearly been such a big struggle for her and Dave, because she's openly talked about how she was just not into sex with him for years. She made some pretty, some comments that I imagine would be very hard for Dave to hear publicly on the internet. Oh, he even talked about that, how it was really hard on him. That everyone was, hearing that his wife wasn't satisfied by him. And yeah, not ideal. Not ideal.
On the other hand, when you Google what does it take to make a great sex life, you see things like communication, trust, being able to relax together, being able to be in each other's presence and just be fully vulnerable and open with one another. I mean, that's something I can get on board with, because sex is something great. Sex is something that two people have to work on. It's not just this body experience. It's about being more connected, more at ease in each other's presence, more willing to be vulnerable, to trust one another.
More willing to not roll your eyes when your husband talks about how the Barbie movie touched on the pain he felt in his existential crisis.
It's sad to see that the way that they have been victimized by an institution that encouraged them, again, to do things that were not good for them. And now there's this adaptation of secular awareness about sex that's been distilled through Christian filters down into this stuff that is both undermining the patriarchy of their parents' generation while trying to morph it and maintain that into a new thing, when you could just let go of the entire way that's fucking you up.
And I feel like this is just fundamentally not honest, and I do think a big part of it is that they're not able to be honest with themselves, or at least Bethany isn't, because she's talking about how the real secrets to great sex is being vulnerable and being willing to see each other more deeply and connect. But what we saw in that Barbie review from them was that they don't meet each other. Dave listens to her, but she doesn't listen to him. She doesn't create a safe space for him to share his authentic feelings. She was very dismissive of him while talking that whole video. So I'm
maybe that doesn't stand for their whole relationship,
Maybe, but it all felt pretty true to something that was very core to Dave, if you know what I mean. It wasn't just about the movie. It was what the movie represented was something very deep in his life, and he's suffered a lot and talked about suicidal ideation, and I don't know. It's Bethany's not wrong that sure, sexual preferences can shift, and it is usually important in long-term relationships to put conscious effort into your sexual relationship, but it also just feels they have to do so much work just to get to I don't even know if they are at a baseline of sexual satisfaction, but it's just you really are turning sex into this chore, and it's almost taking the idea that it's a woman's wifely duty, which they do believe, but then putting this shiny spin on it. So it has the sense of being empowering, but there's no space at all for maybe this guy just isn't for you ultimately. Maybe he just doesn't get you going, and that is okay.
Yeah, and listen, just because I'm a slut doesn't mean everybody has to be.
Everyone doesn't
but I
have to
think
be
there
slut.
is a case for some people, at least, if not more people, just having more sexual experience, especially before making a lifelong enmeshing, child raising, arrangement that's really hard to untangle once you enter in it. Because looking back, most people who have had multiple partners, had maybe lived with different people, you learn a lot, and you find out through each partnership. I was just thinking on the way over here, in fact, I don't regret any relationship that I've been in. I don't think anyone was the right one or the wrong one. It was they were right while they were right, and I learned things about myself and what I want and desire, and what I'm able to provide for a relationship, and what I'm able, what I want, what I actually am looking for by just experiencing myself in different contexts. And that's allowed, that learning process has allowed me to now feel really secure and good and really satisfied in a relationship in a way that feels so natural, in something that I can't relate. Granted, I haven't been in their experience, obviously, because I don't think it's, if I if everybody married their first partner
Well,
and stayed
yeah.
it sounds like a lot of work, but maybe that's not actually necessary. I just think the better you know yourself, the healthier you're going to be able to show up in relationships, and the easier it'll be. It's like,
and you don't know what you don't know. So as we've talked about before, most people need at least several years of dating around to just purely for the fact of like, we all have these. I mean, I guess some people are had really healthy attachment growing up, or have somehow been able to do enough therapy in advance. But I feel like most people need to sort of play out their dysfunctional ideas about relationships.
Yeah.
Which, in the like fantasy world of Christian marriage, there's no space for that. Because it's just the idea like, no, you can just meet your husband at 19 and, just go off into the sunset. But like, that's just not how Homo sapiens work. We all generally have a lot of dysfunctional relationship patterns that we learned from our upbringing. And it's useful to be in different relationships with people that often it takes a lot of dating for people to find the person they're most compatible with.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't even know. It's like each person just activates different parts of you, and so you do learn a lot about yourself through incompatibility. Like, it's not a failure to date people you're incompatible with. That's actually how you learn. Because you realize, like, what was it that made me drawn to someone who couldn't meet my needs? Like, what ways, you learn about what of my needs did I not realize were so important that now having them not be met, and there's just so much. There's so much you learn through quote unquote failed relationships. But again, in this like fantasy paradigm, there's no space for that, because if you have sex with someone, then you have like robbed God, or like robbed yourself of something in the future, robbed your future spouse. Like, it's just, it's an absurd ideology.
Again, like total fear mongering in order to control people in institutions that perpetuate this kind of ideology. And again, I'm not like against marriage. I'm not, per se, I'm not against, I'm not against, heteronormative couples. I'm not against having kids. Like, I think everybody should just do what feels natural and good for them. And then then the people who are like fit for and who want to have kids will do it. And people who want to get married will do so because it feels like doable, because they've had enough experience to know themselves and have, anyway, I've gone on enough about this.
I love how we haven't even got into the video there.
That a lot of things have changed more recently, like in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll just speak personally. I got to a point basically 4 years into our marriage where I just kind of hit a big wall of disappointment and went to get counseling. Mostly thinking you should get counseling. I was mostly thinking really Bethany should get counseling. But I'm going to lead in this and make it about me and my issues.
Smart. Recognized his own. I mean, that's a common thought. It's my partner's fault, not mine. But he was like, I'm going to take responsibility here. Yeah,
but he did acknowledge, which is like
good for him.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a lot about me and my issues after all.
But then I did go get counseling.
But then you did go get she did go get counseling.
Yeah.
So
But Bethany, from what I know, went to like a Christian counselor, and Dave went to a, like qualified counselor. Maybe the Christian ones are qualified.
It's like a Unitarian Universalist.
There's multiple different levels of how that worked out.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, I've probably been like, maybe like less thinking about, we need to grow as much, or we have issues, more like optimistic, I guess, would you say?
About our marriage, you definitely presented a more optimistic picture.
Yeah.
Interesting. She was saying that she was more optimistic, but I read that as like toxic positivity. And then he said, you definitely presented it as more positive. That was I see just the little tidbits. It's also interesting the way they communicate. Yeah, it does seem like she's sort of been well trained her whole life to just be very, shiny, happy people, so to speak. While he's been wrestling with these really deep issues that he's like, no, these need attention. And it seems like maybe they have fundamentally different approaches, like naturally, where like when he sees a problem, he's like, I need to dive into this, and like I'm troubled by it, so I go in deeper. But then with Bethany, maybe when she senses a problem, she runs further from it. Just a possibility.
Yeah, and I think that in some ways you have thought more optimistically, or even if I were to ask, you would say, we're happy.
Yeah.
I was miserable. I think you were calling. You were like, I just don't know. I can't really make you happy. And I'm pretty happy. That's more what you were saying at the time.
Yeah.
I also feel like she's just been so conditioned by this whole system since birth that she may have believed she was happy, or like it wasn't ringing any alarm bells for her because it was also familiar. I think that can be the thing.
I was going to say happiness usually is the guise of familiarity and the assurance that your life is better than other people's, more valid than other people's.
I wonder
because
what
of
his
your
upbringing was like.
To Christ.
I know she's from like a big wealthy family with
She's
Nazi
from a
ancestors.
Big wealthy Nazi family.
Yeah, and they're all over 6 foot. Just a fun fact. And she's taller than Dave. Just a fun fact. But I don't know anything about his upbringing. I'm assuming he was Christian his whole life though.
But I was pretty miserable for good reason.
Can you unpack that a little bit more?
It wasn't her fault. I just had a lot to work through, and I entered our relationship hoping in a lot of ways that it would give me what I wanted. And through the course of 4 years of time, I realized that my biggest problem was not what I wasn't getting out of our relationship. It was what I was bringing to our relationship.
Okay, such a common experience to think that, a relationship will like be the thing that fixes you and that gives you what you want. And that, I feel like, is a classic example of a scenario that ideally you play out before you get married, You experience what it's like to find a person and think that they're going to be the one that solves it all, and then you realize that it doesn't fundamentally change anything about who you are and what your own dysfunctions are. And then usually you do that with a number of people, and then you realize like, oh yeah, a relationship truly cannot save any of us. Like even when it's great, which it usually takes time to find something truly great, but like it's almost like he had to go through something that ideally that was like developmentally appropriate to have happened before marriage, but he was already in a marriage. So no wonder he felt so like miserable and trapped, and because he didn't have options by the point that he was reckoning with that, and which kind of shows that he entered into the agreement of marriage under false pretenses. Totally, which is that this is going to be the thing that makes me whole, and that is what this Christian ideology kind of instills in people, is that belief. So yeah, it does feel like in the vein of like uninformed consent with a lot of this stuff, as John DeLynn on Mormon Stories is always talking about. Like you're entering into a marriage without even really knowing enough about relationships to know what you're agreeing to.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, I thought marriage would give me what I wanted." Well, he was obviously not even able to explore, understand what he actually wanted, and maybe he realized this thing that was told to want marriage, and this is the end all be all, and you're saving yourself for that, and you have all these feelings, but it's Satan until this thing.
This is what's so disturbing about these communities, is like they have been lied to by their elders, because the elder couples in these communities, they have the same kind of issues in their marriage, and they have the same kind of like, everyone is like being sold a fantasy, agreeing to it, buying into it, realizing it's not what they claimed, but then there's this expectation to like maintain the image externally, as Bethany kind of highlights by him. So it just sucks that in these communities the older people are like essentially lying to the younger people, and it's that weird thing of like, this is just how it is, and that also just makes you, the individual, always the problem.
Yes.
But it's like, it's so messed up how many generations of couples have been miserable because of all this, but like they still will peddle the same fantasy to the younger generations, because it's like a cult-like mindset, and to question that is to like question the core tenets of it all, and it's just insane to have like this is just what happens when you have a high control group where the fundamental tenets are false.
Yeah, and it seems like Dave, at least, is sort of beginning to grapple with that on some level.
And even her, I mean, she's having to, that's why she's doing this whole sexual awakening stuff, is because she was like, nobody talked about sex.
And will it stay contained? Who knows?
Capable of in our relationship, which was very underdeveloped and very low.
I'm so interested. I feel like everyone's going to be interested more in...
I'm coming out of a closet here.
No, okay, yeah.
There are more than one closets. There are a number of different.
Okay, so it's recognizing that he was underdeveloped in this marriage. Again, ideally you would be a bit more developed before marriage.
And he's doing the work of realizing the ways that the patriarchy is hurting him, because this is like a patriarchal idea, and patriarchy means, by its very nature, means out of balance, because if you have a prominence of one side over the other, then you're out of balance. And the ideas stemming from patriarchy that get like so hounded into us by it's like a relationship with state thing and countries wanting to incentivize people to reproduce. There is a nice side of marriage that it allowed like some power to women, for instance, to lay claim to property as a result of being in relationship with a man, rather than being like, oh, I get to say everything. Like, there was an advantage there. And maybe there, used to be advantages to monogamy for health reasons or for progeny reasons, knowing who parent is. But like, honestly, in the modern world today, like, we don't have to worry about most of that stuff. Like, it's never been safer to have sex. It's never been easier to decide when to have children, and to make sure that that's a decision based on like an abundance mentality, when you can offer a child its best possible life, and not this like, well, the worst case scenario happened to me and there's no other option, so I'm just gonna try to rear this consciousness despite all odds on this world that's constantly enclosing on me. Like, who wants that? Like, that's not gonna help the world like become a better place. Like, that's the reason there's so much fuck shit in the world, is because people are being brought into existence, and there are all these false, harmful pretenses against their better natures.
Oh, we need to watch that video on why it's selfish to not have kids.
I'm so interested. I feel like everyone's going to be interested more.
She definitely uses laughter as a coping mechanism. Anytime he says anything kind of like serious and vulnerable, like he just said that he was underdeveloped and, he was the problem, and which is a very emotionally mature thing to say. And I just felt like at every point she would do this like...
Oh, it's an anxiety steam whistle for sure. I do that all the time.
From my perspective, there's nothing in what he's saying that really should make her anxious, because but I just, again, feel like the emotional repression is so strong in these cultures that even that feels like intensely vulnerable, perhaps.
Oh, totally.
Even though I'm like, he's just saying like very normal, like growing up things, which was like, I was in this relationship and I realized that I was bringing a lot of like dysfunction to it, and I reckoned with myself. And
I forget how little space they are able to hold for different ideas and things. Like, I always think that, the level that we talk on as friends is not like the standard.
I
know. People be like, whoa. Someone will be like, I saw my mother's ghost today. I'm like, oh, that's
well,
interesting.
yeah, I experience it, because sometimes I'll say something to someone at a party or ask them a question, and then I'm like,
whoa, bro, that's really deep.
That's really far out for them. Like, I just feel like they think I'm a weirdo.
And
I'm coming out of a closet here.
no, okay.
There are more than one closets. There are a number of different closets.
Yeah, all the mansions in my father's kingdom hath closet upon closet, so many to come out of all the time. As someone who used a lot of Freudian slips for a long time.
We both went and got counseling last year separately. We didn't do marriage counseling. I found...
Which we should.
Yeah,
we
really want to.
Really fun. We would both really enjoy that.
We really want to do just like basic marriage counseling, and then we really want to do like work with a sex therapist. Y'all know I've talked about that a lot. I think there's so much benefit. I think every married couple should get marriage counseling, individual counseling, and see a sex therapist. Like, that's my personal opinion.
I particularly need it. But she says everyone needs it, or everyone.
I'm a monster. I'm just obviously like, an immoral piece of filth that is only spared eternal destruction and burnation due to the grace of Christ. I'm obviously a freaky deek. He does need a therapist. If you did not kiss till your wedding, you need to see a therapist.
I just think that, there is so much more to marriage and so much like joy and excitement and life to be had. And I think a lot of us just settle because we are like, well, this is just the way it is.
I think marriage counseling is great. I will say, and I think it's great that marriage counseling is like a resource people can go to when they're going through difficult times, having like an unbiased third party, blah, blah, blah. But I do think it's a bit problematic that so many couples like Dave and Bethany are having to learn basic relationship communication skills within marriage. Like, again, ideally, those would be things that you learn before entering into a lifelong commitment, through your personal experiences and presumably therapy, and so no shade on marriage therapy, but it seems like the type of work they had to do, like, that would have ideally been done before. It's a lot to have to reckon with having already made this long-term commitment, because all of your figuring out has to stay within that box, which is hard.
That's a high compression learning ground. That's got to hurt a lot. Like, feels a little intense. Also, the other case for not having children is we have 8 billion people. Like 200 years ago, there was so fewer people here.
I thought we were not allowed to say that because it was eco-fascism, or there's actually tons of space for everyone on the planet. And I'm like, that may be technically true, but it doesn't seem like we're very good at not abusing resources. So
no,
it does seem just objectively true that generally having kids is going to use more resources.
Where have you been anywhere and been like, I just wish there were more people around?
Yeah, it's one of those, maybe
your coworker's birthday party, maybe.
Maybe technically we could fit everyone and also probably meet everyone's needs resource-wise as well. But the fact of the matter is we just don't have the systems in place that are doing that. So
and we're becoming ever more consumeristic. More people are more nations are becoming industrialized, and they all want to live the American lifestyle, because if Americans are entitled to it, why aren't they? Yeah. And we don't have the air capacity to hold enough cow farts from all the billions of people in the world who want to eat steak every day, like Jordan Peterson.
Seeing our individual counselors helped a ton. I grew so much, and I grew in ways that I didn't even go. I didn't go to counseling for the specific areas that I grew in, and then I grew a ton. I wasn't particularly going to get counseling for our relationship or for my role as a wife, but then
which I was like,
I was perfect as a wife, so I obviously didn't go because I had any issues, but
I was going for other stuff. And then as we started talking, my counselor was like, you have some really, bad perspectives. She was so black and white and just basically you need work on these things. And I was like, oh. And then you saw
I saw a great counselor. He took me through a number of different things. Very, very kind man, and very knowledgeable, had a lot of training. And
very small thing, but even the fact that Dave just was very, very kind man. Men don't usually call each other kind. I can't explain it, but just the fact that he said that shows that he's kind, because what we see in others, we see in ourselves.
No, I mean, maybe I'm projecting from the little I know about Dave, but I have a sense of affinity with him. I can relate to a lot of the things that he said, including wrestling with suicidal ideation in a hyper-religious context, and to now wearing a black shirt and having blonde highlights.
He was both a former pastor and had a degree in, I think, counseling or psychology or something. So
yeah,
he took me through EMDR, which is a trauma processing.
Dave did EMDR. That's why he's so cute.
EMDR.
It's a trauma processing program where you basically, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so he took me back to
That's the scientific word for hypnosis. That's why they did the clock thing, right? It's because your eyes go back and forth, back and forth.
My EMDR therapist fired me before we got to the EMDR part. So we were just in I think I went to her 4 times, but there's just you have to do all the prep. And I think at the time, it's funny.
They fired you?
Well, because I kept missing appointments. I think she could tell I wasn't fully bought into it. But it's funny though, because she was a Jungian therapist who is very into parts therapy, and actually what she did teach me about parts as a concept, and also Jungian symbology, or the way he uses. She had 1 million trinkets over her office, and she would make you use the trinkets to. And I just felt it was I don't know. I found it hard to truly let go and sink into that process at the time. But now I'm I feel I would love it. But then it also did propel me more into that eventually anyway, so it kind of served its purpose. Why was I talking about that?
I feel Jungians tend to be a little bit more flashy than what you gravitate toward. You a more straightforward, grounded versus into
But now looking at that, I'm actually can really, and I really feel I got something out of therapy with her without doing the EMDR. So it's just a boring personal story.
No, it's great. We can all agree here with Girl Defined that therapy is great, and even if you get fired by your therapist, you can still have learned a lot of good things from them.
Yeah. Such as the concepts of parts, and I still was observing myself in the way I would engage in the process of picking out the trinkets, and noticing my own cringe, and noticing I don't know, things that felt like almost like triteness in myself, or like the ways I was performing, but like to myself. Anyway, so it was all like an interesting, like useful experience. But yeah, I'm glad she fired me and made space for someone else, because I feel like.
Yeah.
But then I'm kind of jealous that I haven't done EMDR, because everyone always talks about it, and I'm like,
I've tried to do like self-hypnosis and things, but I just feel like I can't quite get there myself.
I really feel like I'm not an
interested in
ideal
doing it.
candidate for stuff. Like I have a hard time.
What I found working better is to either do in conjunction with binaural beats, because then it takes you can like.
I do like binaural beats.
I forget. I think it's like is it delta or theta wave is the kind of the frequency you're supposed to be at in hypnotic or EMDR states, where it's kind of like that dream brain where images and impressions and memories are all kind of conjured up in one little soup. But yeah, I'd be interested to do it with a professional, but I think I need to get to a blue state so I can have free healthcare.
To my history, family stuff, and it's still to this day, I don't know that I talk about it as traumatic, but EMDR, regardless, seemed to be pretty helpful. But that was really the beginning of my awakening to what's really going on in our relationship and in myself.
Yeah. So where would you say we are now?
That's interesting that he does describe it as an awakening, and the way he's describing it is like a very genuine awakening. But then I feel like Girl Defined a lot acts as if they've had these big awakenings, but it would just be about like some way they're supposed to become more scrupulous or like entrenched deeper in these dysfunctional ways of thinking, whereas that's like an actual good example of an awakening through therapy. Bethany does seem like she has had some useful sexual awakening, but then I also feel like she's still just putting so much pressure on herself now to be like this multi-orgasmic, like very sexual wife who's always turned on, and it's like, that's also fine if you're not that, and maybe you're now like feeling like you should be that inauthentic. Like the times when you authentically were that, you had to shut it down, but now,
So where would you say we are now?
She's like, seriously, this video is my way of finding this out, because we don't communicate off camera ever.
Where we are now, I think we are.
Okay, there is something to be said about hashing it out in front of a camera, because life doesn't provide a lot of opportunities to dig deep into things unless you're like going to therapy with somebody you're close to, you know what I mean? Which seems like a good
very
step for them.
annoying
And
in all friendship scenarios.
yeah, I appreciate two blondes getting together.
Two bimbos, a couple of idiots who are bad at maths.
Both really aligned on the direction that we're taking. We are very much going in general in the same direction.
It's an interesting way to respond to like, how are we doing as a couple, or like how is our relationship doing? Because the fact that it was all very like, we're headed in the same direction, we are enduring together, we are dialed in on process, because if we slip for a single moment, we'll fucking hate each other's guts. I might be projecting just based on what I've seen in the Barbie video, and how fundamentally different they seem to be, and just how hard I imagine it would be to make that come into harmony in a way that feels satisfying for both of you.
I'm interested to know if the person who conducted EMDR with Dave is a Christian or not. Because in the same way that like...
former pastor, I think.
Oh, really?
But he said like and former pastor, it could have been in his youth. And it said he was a like licensed therapist, I think.
It seemed, yeah.
But he really does seem like he's had some good therapy.
Yeah.
The guy sounds alright.
I'm very, very excited and passionate about certain understandings and resources that I've come across, and you are very excited as well. So I think having that alignment is where we're at now.
Yeah.
So now we're able to speak more and more with the same language,
Totally.
the same psychological language, the same personal development language. And I think that's given us I don't know, it's really cool, because we're able to do it ourselves in our own lives, but then to be able to also come together and do it in your relationship, that's, I think, become more exciting. So I would say the sense.
I think it's cool that Dave does seem like genuinely passionate about the process of healing. And I do think there is something to be said for like any two people who are trying can make it work to some degree, not necessarily, but like he seems to just have found it so rewarding to have discovered what he's discovered so far, that he is feeling like optimistic about them being together is the sense I'm getting, which has been a question mark for me.
Yeah, and listen, they could stay together for the rest of their lives. I'm not like rooting for them to divorce or whatever. It's like however it plays out, I just hope it plays out to both of their mutual satisfaction. And it sounds like they are making steps that seem really positive.
Yeah. The psyche reveals itself in layers, as I've always said, and I do think that sometimes you have to maintain certain delusions about permanency to like allow you to feel safe enough to do the work you need to do at that stage, and then when you get into a new stage, there's a new harder truth you have to accept. But I love what I'm seeing from Dave.
Christians are like onions.
Yeah.
Come in layers. Somebody once told me that the world was going to roll me, and that somebody is now dead, unfortunately, as of yesterday.
Now is a lot more one of excitement, a lot more hope, and a lot more conversations where we are aligned.
Yeah, I think something that people may not know about us is like we are very, very open and willing to change. We're very open to like new ideas and stuff. And so that's been really helpful and exciting because, the resources that Dave has found and that he has.
Hearing a fundamentalist Christian say they're excited and open about new ideas is like hearing about the radical left in American politics. You know what I mean? It's like, you've only scratched the surface, but I love the spirit and I applaud and encourage you because that's it. It's funny how you can really see every single generation, like our parents did a better job at untangling the massive pile of dung that is American patriarchy or, Eurocentric patriarchy, Victorian era patriarchy. Every generation does a little bit better and the standards become a little less strict. The iron hand of Christian fascism is slowly letting go because it just can't, because secular knowledge is just undoing the systems. And this is the type of awareness that ultimately is undoing the thing that their parents used to hold as like unfixed truth, that they were tricked into entering these relationships under that kind of false pretense as well, without having any access to the tools that we all have access to. So in one hand, it gives you like compassion for the people who just like by fault of not being born before the internet, like had to endure a ton of shit that religion sold them.
I actually do think for all of the ways that Bethany is problematic, I do think she has unlearned a lot of toxic positivity. I just remember that I watched a few Instagram reels from her mom the other day.
Her mom is a character.
Very toxic positivity energy. Like just, and it's interesting to look back on previous generations, and it feels like with every generation that you go back, there was like a thicker mask that everyone wore, and that was just seen as normal, whereas like to the younger generations, that's like jarring to us because we like know it's not true, because I do feel like there has been some increase in self-awareness and in... Yeah, I mean, self-awareness is aided by not feeling the need to repress, right? So
dug into aren't necessarily like resources that I would have found or initially been attracted to. And same with me. Like
good ones, secular ones that weren't from some like unhinged Christian fundamentalist.
How to groom your young Christian tattooless wife.
I find stuff that he may not have initially been interested. And so it's really cool as a married couple to not be like, no, you need to read from the same books that I am, and you need to learn from the same people that I'm learning from. And like, just like dictating what each other must do. We've both been really open to like, hey, this really connected with me. Would you be willing to listen to this or to read that? Or let's read this together. And even if it's not initially what the other person would have picked up. And I think that's been huge for our growth because I'm reading things and listening to things that I definitely would have.
Interesting that there's even such a divide in the resources they find palatable. Not that everyone has to be attracted to the same like healing content, but it makes sense with their different ideologies and approaches. I do feel like, again, Dave has a more sensible, secular approach to a lot of things, and she has a more entrenched deeper in your dysfunctions to cope with problems. Like, I think he's doing like actual healing work, and I really just feel like she's had such intense software installed of like, whatever's going on, just be more Christian. And then it's just an ever worsening cycle because those Christian ideas are what's causing all the problems.
Can I just say it was fascinating watching her mom and being like, oh, she like grew up in the shadow of that woman. Like her mom is like actual like pastor mom.
Yes. And they're all wealthy.
And that makes sense.
Things and listening to things that I definitely would have picked out or sought out myself,
You've been a good example of being open-minded. Some of the things that you would bring, as I was finding some of these new resources, I was like, well, it's not this new resource that I found, so I'm just kind of brushing your resources aside, and I was, a jerk about it. So for a little while, but you were able to look past a lot of that and see some of the good in what I was bringing, which is more than I can say for myself.
He's so gracious to her.
Yeah.
I want to say he displays so much grace towards her that I haven't seen her display towards him.
I have a little crush on Dave, I'm going to say.
Yeah, you're not the only one. It's just good to see an earnest man for once.
Yeah, no, there's like a shared affinity. I've like, I get it. Not that I was married to Girl Define, but
a lot of the time.
I'm really excited. I think that the resources he's brought to the table, and then we'll jump into some of the questions, but I just have to say that's all I want.
Yeah, this was kind of fun.
Yeah. I would say that the thing I really appreciate probably the most about the resources that he's bringing is that I think that they are very, very, they go deeper, like they're very practical and they're very honest. Sometimes what I found in some of like the Christian marriage books or Christian, just like basic talks is I think sometimes they kind of stay shallow and they say like they're getting to the root biblically, but oftentimes it's just like, sir.
Where were these people in the Barbie review? Even Bethany's being more reasonable right now. I know we're only like a few minutes in still, but
the term like every time she brings in the Bible, I'm like, oh yeah, we're talking about the Bible. Every reference to the Bible to like relationships and marriage in the Bible is horrifying.
Heinous,
like what are you talking about? It's like, if thou takest a slave of the neighboring village, then behold, she is thine for life. But if she disagrees, you can stone her to death in the streets. Like, what are you getting?
You started out as an old English man and became an Indian man by the end.
That's the Bible. That's the reverse Bible.
Sorry, Andrew. I'm trying to nurse without being like, exposing the whole world to me.
Nursing on camera, bold.
I know I've got like a little corner. We can trim it up. We can crop this bad boy a little bit. I feel like the resources that you have found go really deep and actually talk about like the truth of.
She's recognizing that Christian resources don't get to the bottom of it or talk about, God, she might evolve too.
Okay, I gotta say, I've been using the term fundamentalist to define her, and though she is seems like pretty conservative, I don't know that they would classify as like fundamentalist Christians. Maybe they are, but when I think about fundamentalists, I'm thinking like neckbeard. I'm thinking like home church in the woods.
The Duggars count. Like these are part of the Duggars sort of circle. So I do think they are fundamentalists.
Oh, are they friends with the Duggars?
I think they might be, yeah. You really should watch Shiny Happy People. Seriously, Tara.
What's actually going on in marriages or individuals and give really, really practical, helpful guidance in a way that I haven't seen necessarily tons of Christian resources do. So that's something I'm really excited about. And it can come across like for me as a little uncomfortable because it's like, oh wow, they just they go there, they talk about all the things. And I think that that's been amazing, and it's personally pushed me to find people and resources that I wouldn't have initially. So I'm coming out with a course for Christian women on sex. And I'm going to be releasing.
It's like part of her, the whole thing of we just accept truth in layers, it usually, it's rare for people to just immediately realize all of their delusions at once. Part of her evolution is confronting the fantasy she was sold about sex. So I feel like her selling her course and now being a sexpert as her sort of main gig, that's part of her healing journey, or at least part of her personal evolution. And that is kind of adorable to think about. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny that she's immediately turned it into her becoming an authority. But, we all know how it is when you have a platform. So I don't know. I'm this is interesting.
And for most of her points, I'm yeah, those are all good until you get to the Bible role play, and then I'm shake it up a little bit. Again, do the Gilgamesh. Maybe try Beowulf next time. Be Banquo, what's up, my gayat?
Wish I knew the references.
It's Beowulf.
The people that I had on, experts that I had on for this course were people. Some of them were people I maybe a year ago wouldn't have had on to talk about sex.
I've been so impressed with a lot of the people that you've chosen to have on, what you've told me about them. That goes back to what I said about being more aligned and where we're going and the way we're talking about things. Yeah, I've been really pleased about that.
But I have found it so helpful.
Yeah.
You know,
It's not just.
It seems like because this is like her, and maybe things have got worse since this was a few months ago, and the Barbie video just felt so much worse dynamic wise. Maybe we just caught them on an off day, or maybe her like political conservatism is activated in a different sort of way, and because this video is about like their relationship, she is able to bring more openness. I'm seeing more openness in her than I saw in the Barbie
versus an
video.
indirect subject where all the unconscious or simmering stuff gets
where she doesn't really have
brought
enough
out.
investment
To hide it.
Yeah.
Or to you know, embody
show
it
up.
in the most positive way, shall we say.
Like I'm much more impressed with her so far in this video than I was in Barbie. I keep saying that.
Look at us having non-binary, holistic views on people who are just trying to make it through the systems fucked up systems we were born into. And whatever pace that people do that is just that whatever pace they do that at.
first question, and I'm going to go through questions, but we're going to have a conversation kind of like about each one. So, and these are questions that y'all asked. Okay. Does it bother Dave that you talk so openly about sex online?
The answer is yes, but in a good way.
That's not what I heard you said in a different thing.
I like my boundaries being crossed in a good way.
He's like, being degraded online gets me going.
So I am proud of how open and honest Bethany is about sex, how she's...
I thought it was cool when she said I didn't turn her on and that she felt like a dry bag of bones when I was coming onto her.
When she said it was like fucking the scarecrow from Wizard of Oz after the witch set him on fire. That's how attracted to me she was. That I actually appreciated that.
Owning her sexuality herself, and rather than expecting or requiring somebody to give her something in order for her to be sexually fulfilled. But because Bethany does talk a good bit about sex, it indirectly does reflect on me in our sexual relationship, and it challenges my needy desire.
I would say it pretty directly reflects on you when she's, openly talking about how she doesn't like having sex with you. She doesn't have any desire at all to do that. I don't know.
Desire to be thought of as competent and strong.
You're so strong, baby boy.
You're so strong, competent Dave.
Sweet baby Dave.
You can hold us in your arms whenever you want. We won't ask for much. We won't make you act out Song of Solomon. We'll just be held.
You are enough.
So something she says could expose me as sexually inadequate, or cause people to question, like, oh, what kind of a sex life do they have? How good is he in bed? Does he even have what it takes? All of those.
Does he have what it takes? Dave.
Oh, that is humiliating. That's like a human terror.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I feel like, I relate, honestly, but like Bethany uses the internet so much as a way to process what she's going through, and seems pretty oblivious a lot of the time that like the real truth of what she's like always kind of comes through.
Mm-hmm. Though, can we say, being the woman in the relationship, it's nice that she has a voice to be able to talk about things that previous generation of women weren't able to talk about, that it's now more acceptable for her to be able to do this, and that it ultimately did compel him into lead the way in detoxifying and, cleaning up the cognitive gears.
All of those things that I would question about myself, of course I project onto, well, that's what other people could think of. But the awesome thing about that is this creates an opportunity for me to face that in myself. And that at the end of the day, my sexual adequacy is not something worth keeping around or focusing on. In fact, that's something that I'm trying to move away from, is that whole mindset together.
I'm just going asexual, baby. I don't think about it ever.
So the exposure via Bethany talking about sex and herself and our relationship is very exposing in that sense, or at least it seems to be exposing to me. And that is an awesome opportunity for me to basically challenge myself where I'm weak, which is what other people think. How am I going to deal with that and handle that myself? Am I going to get my sense of adequacy from what other people think, even from what Bethany thinks? Or am I going to have that self-contained inside me where I can be around people, even people who think less of me, and still retain my form and my shape and move into the world with confidence, regardless.
He's in his Taoist phase.
Oh, yeah.
I'm loving it. And this is a mindset that has continued to be important to him because he talked about it 3 months later in Barbie.
Dove.
The Dove.
Regardless of how other people might view me. So it's just an awesome opportunity to confront that.
Yeah.
So I would say, which is actually how I'm starting to think of all of social media in that sense. Like, this is just an opportunity.
Yeah.
But the way people can take you or one up you or try to kind of, ridicule or, create these kind of categories of greater than, less than, that's just an opportunity to become strong.
Look at Dave dismantling patriarchy.
Honestly, though, like just the
unexpected ally.
The way he's so clearly over. I mean, their kind of Christianity sort of hinges on a superiority mindset, and he's unpacked that, and he's like, no one is more or less than, and even if he's just seen through the game of more than, less than, which
is patriarchy, which is capitalism, which is,
and that's, I mean, he's getting dangerously close to say, I almost thought he was, well, he kind of did say, like, my sexual adequacy doesn't define my worth, and I'm like, if you just extend that to more things, I mean, you've unpacked your whole system that you two are coming out of. Oof.
I mean, the reason I talk about sex online is because of like my desire for other women to know, like, there are more, like, we all have questions, we all have areas where we feel.
Not saying that that's not true, but I think it's more of a, like, personal need first.
We have questions because we weren't allowed to have sex and nobody had an honest conversation with us.
I think it's her playing out what she needed to hear and what she need. But
that's all their whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is the way, my way, what I'm experiencing.
That human tendency to immediately, it's almost like we feel like we have to be a guru to even be valid in talking about it, instead of just being like, this is my experience.
Yeah.
I feel like we're not.
As Nietzsche said, you have your way, I have mine. As for the way, it does not exist. Unless the way is the Tao.
The Tao.
Like, we're not good at, or we struggle in. And like I said, sometimes in the Christian world, it can be like, yes, you just need to serve each other, and that's where the best sex comes from, or whatever. Like, being, whatever. There can be like these basic terms, and you're like, well, we have, like, physically more struggles, or we haven't been able to, like, achieve something, or
achieve something.
Okay.
What might that something
Sounds
be?
like we're looking at erectile issues and we're looking at orgasm issues.
Yeah.
We're, like, not connecting, even though we're, like, going through the motions, and we need help with that. And so
sounds like they're like, no, we're not just, like, not feeling the desire. We actually, like, cannot have sex. Like, we're, like, physically struggling to make the mechanics work.
Well, that happens. Like, I've heard that from several, like, partners and friends who say that, like, their first sexual experience, they didn't, and relationships felt like they couldn't, they weren't even performing sexually because, like, they weren't didn't have enough experience with the process to even know what that, like, energy building and like sensuality was even about, and their body would, like, clench up and resist and not be enjoyable. And how many Christian women were told, like, oh, sex isn't enjoyable, you're just supposed to, it's for your husband. It's a way of, like, him feeling good about you and tolerate you in the house.
Well, it's like when you're learning to snowboard, you're not necessarily having fun per se. You're kind of doing something that's rewarding. It's not till you're, like, familiar enough with how to snowboard that you can start, like, really enjoying it.
That's what I'm telling you about DaVinci Resolve editing versus iMovie. I'm like, you'll love it.
I never claim to be a sex expert. I am very open that we're learning and growing, and that's why I'm constantly recommending resources and pointing you to people that I trust, that I've learned from them.
I'm selling a $169 course.
From that he's learned from. So
I would have more of a problem with it if you were trying to come across as some sort of expert, or like, but the fact that you're more of a curator trying to bring along resources,
I would have a problem with that, babe, because
that are helping you That's
Yeah. Okay. And I know you're going to ask, like, where's the sex course or whatever? It's not released yet, but you can go to my...
Did Dave just say, unless it serves the aims of the proletariat?
How do you model godly manhood for your son, Davey, our 3-year-old son, our firstborn?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot more just really recently, realizing that I do really want him to have good male role models in his life, not just get his idea for what manhood is from women, honestly. So he needs to be around other men.
It's like, women are no good. I do not want him to be learning about masculinity from them. My wife is more sexist than I am.
Around other men. And as far as me modeling it, I don't really think so much about me modeling it as much as I think about becoming the real thing myself.
Yeah.
And then just being around him. So I need to basically accept myself in my complete manliness and my manhood and expand out into the world and create and expand my capacity and confront myself and take full responsibility. And the more I do that, and then I'm around Davey,
Okay, I think it's interesting that he specifically said, I don't want my son to get his ideas about masculinity from women, which I feel like is essentially saying he doesn't want his son to get his ideas about masculinity from Bethany. Mm-hmm. Because I think generally it's good.
As the woman in the room.
That's almost like, he's almost like more of a feminist than that statement is. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he seems like someone who might think in general it's good for a young boy to learn from women and to embrace the feminine. But I feel like the reason he's saying it is because, yeah, his mum Bethany is more sexist than him. We learned that 3 months later in the Barbie video.
Yeah. And
so I understand why he wouldn't want his son to get those ideas about masculinity, because he knows that those guys are toxic.
Yeah.
Because Bethany's never been a man, so it's all an abstract to her. She just repeats what she's been heard. But for him, he's like, no, if my son is the type of man that Bethany might, at this moment in time, want him to be, that's not going to be good.
He recognizes he has a role to play and a responsibility. But I kind of... like, even the category of, like, a godly man already comes with so many assumptions, especially when you consider that God famously stated, at least in the Bible, that they were not a man at all. And, it's just human projection, obviously. Yeah. Like, this concept that I'm going to impose on God. But, like... his idea of going out in the world and taking on more responsibility, and this idea that that's what the man does.
But
he goes out and he gets the job, and then it's like...
But maybe... I think Dave is also speaking to the fact that he has shrunk himself in a lot of ways. Sure. And now he's realizing that, like, Dave does kind of seem like he's someone who's needed... Most men don't necessarily need to be more assertive, but maybe Dave is one of the ones that does.
No, I'm speaking from what I think is a place of affinity, being, like, very passive to other people out of, like, a wholesome naivete born of, like, what is felt as a genuine religious experience. Like, he seems like a very sincere person. I have no doubt to believe that he has, like, that's grounded in some kind of, like, sincere connection for him. But,
that's what he's going to get.
Yeah,
I can't model something for him I don't have.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing as parents that we've talked about is, like, being the most authentic and genuine in our relationship in front of them, and, like, learning to genuinely love one another, and all of that I think is going to be the best case scenario for our kids.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. Maybe in another 20 years we'll be like, wow, I totally missed something deeper. But right now it seems like that's the truest way to do it. You have to, like, actually go through the work yourself. You can't take somebody to a level that you're not already at.
Totally.
So
I agree. I think it's cute though. I think y'all have a great relationship. Davey really likes you.
Yeah.
Your son, he thinks you're chill. You guys seem like you really get along. No, I think that's really cool.
He finds you tolerable, which is more than I can say most days.
And you guys actually hang out, which I think is cool.
I've been working on
together.
Well, I've been working on doing
parenting,
being more assertive and demanding when I'm around him, saying this is what we're going to do. Then he throws a fit or something. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. And let him kind of go through that process of, life doesn't always work out the way we want. There are plans. There are things we need to be doing. And not every...
All just feels like, how deep do we want to go here? But it's just all...
I get the need for a parent to, like, need to, like, rein a child.
Oh, yeah,
you can't
definitely.
just, like, give a child free rein, but yeah.
But the things he's picking out from the parenting experience as worth talking about is interesting. Yeah.
Women idea that you have is something that we have time for.
Yeah.
And so he needs to learn that, how to self-regulate and all that, but accept the fact that he has emotions and work through it.
Yeah.
And she is more than happy.
These two are such a stark deviation from the Christians on YouTube. This is really maybe even like more of a significant thing than a lot of people are realizing, because I feel like a lot of the commentary channels are almost like a bit too cynical and maybe haven't gone through a faith crisis experience the way that we have, because not all of anyway, there's a lot of different people, but I feel like the general consensus is like, oh, but these two will like say the right things, but they're always toxic. And I'm like, it does seem like there's some genuine stuff happening here that is quite significant.
Yeah.
And it's but still kind of bubbling under the surface in many ways, but then it's also an extreme leap forward in many ways. And it's like, I am dying to know what's going to happen to these two.
Well, that's the thing. Bringing it back to like technology and just the advances of the internet and social media and how much we're able to learn and communicate about things that were totally inaccessible to former generations.
Gives
and
me a bit
how
of hope.
that alone, is unravel. Like the institutions are unraveling, and we're seeing it statistically across all denominations. People are just learning more and saying like, oh, the systems that were set up as these all-powerful Wizard of Oz things, like all, we have to obey them and this is the one way of doing things. We're realizing like, oh, we actually need the secular world, because these things aren't giving this to us, truth to us, authenticity to us. We're having to seek it out. And now for the really like tight-lid Christians, this is all passing through filters of communicators, right? And so they're like years behind on the discourse in the way that like we can observe in Mormonism and in Christianity across the board. Again, we've already talked about here and in other videos about how like the last generation of Christians would, or 4 generations of Christians ago, if they saw today's Christians, would be like, y'all are burning in hell. You have relaxed every standard of decency and morality.
Yeah.
But that's only because the culture moves ahead. Secularism, people who are, and not all secular people are living in super intentionally or whatever, but like culture moves forward and religion plays catch up. At least it is now. And we'll see how fast it can run, because
We might see an apostatized girl defined in our lifetime.
Yeah, or like a fully declawed one who's just like being de-radicalized from being just exposed to too many perspectives, and it's still like, well, I'm still Christian and therefore I'm good, but like and
Taylor Swift.
Like Taylor Swift, yeah, honestly.
Is more than happy to work through. I'd much rather him throw a massive fit than become the sort of boy that stuffs his emotions and just tries to please everybody, and which is something like what I sort of did.
Yeah. We're totally okay with him having emotions, obviously, and men.
Yeah, obviously, we're fine with that.
Oh man, he was probably such a people pleaser.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you can tell. You can tell.
And then him getting to the boiling point.
I'd rather him get it out so we can see it.
Yeah.
And talk about it and deal with it and stuff, rather than being like, don't.
Yeah. Davey took the like most intense parts of each of our personality, and that's him.
It's great.
He's like 10 of 10 on his best days, and on his worst days, he's like a 10, It's
wow, girl redefined.
Yeah, this was interesting. It's weird watching this one after the Barbie one.
Yeah, it is. I assumed they were going to get on to the part about the open marriage, because Dave, if you're watching.
Dove.
EMDR. No, this is something that I am trying to like realize. This is where I'm at in my healing from growing up in a radical Christian denomination. So radical, the normal radical Christians say they're Satanists. Is realizing that religion has imposed a lot of really divisive binary paradigms about people who leave, about people who are in. Obviously, right? It doesn't want anyone to leave, so everyone on the outside is evil. And when you leave, it's very traumatic because you lose your whole identity, community, and there's a lot of genuine hurt, and it can be very difficult to navigate all of that. But now that I have, and it's been a long time, it's like, my life is not that different than when I was a member of the church. Honestly, like, I live in a lot of ways, it's completely different, right? Like, it's a full 180 swap. But at the same time, like my day-to-day lived experience, I'm certainly happier and healthier now than I've been in the past because I'm just living more authentically and prioritizing like my bodily health versus being like, I'm gonna die in the second coming any day now, so what's the point of exercise, you know? And also like wanting to die and not being able to express or learn because, you know, fear about the outside world and outside information constantly untangling my faith was always, you know, that makes you so anxious. Anyway, so, you know, life is a lot better, but like, I don't feel like I'm that different of a person, you know, I felt like before I was just a seed who's flowered into a person, but I'm still just like the same thing that I was, and the fullness expression that I am now was present in that thing before, even though it wasn't fully manifest. All that is to say is I just don't see myself as that different than them, and I hope more and more can like lower my own sense of like divisiveness and like playing into that like you stupid Christians versus just being like, yeah, these are just people having like a human experience, and we're all entangled in weird ass systems, and we're doing our best to like learn what we can learn and share it with each other and improve the way that we're doing it. And that being said, I'll be sassy as shit the whole time, but don't want to lose that. I'm so grateful. I, you know, prayed like everybody to find the perfect wife to take to the temple to get married for time and all eternity.
Thank God you didn't find her.
Thank God I didn't, honestly, because I would have been so miserable. I probably would have tapped out. I really do not thrive in that kind of thing. It's weird how you're like, you know, I really feel like, you know, I don't believe in free will on a fundamental level. And I just kind of feel like the body, you know, the subconscious works out the thing that it needs to work out to like be safe and thrive where it needs to be. And that's all in relation to environment and information that people are exposed to. But our hope is that people can change, things can change, and in the light of good science and openness, a lot of the more toxic ideas will fall away. If all Christians ended up like the Unitarian Universalists, I'd be like, sweet, great.
Are you ready to head to Patreon and read Stephanie?
I am so ready.
We are reading Stephanie. It's a 80s Mormon fiction book about a drug-addicted Mormon teen written by a Mormon dad, and it is a ride. So come support the channel on Patreon if you want to join us.
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, please.
Even more fun than this video has been, if you can believe
With even more lore, can you believe? Yeah. Well, this has made me excited to keep up with Girl Defined from this point on. I'm now not going to miss a single thing they do. I will never fall off the wagon again. And we're all glad you could be here with us.
Thanks for joining. We love you so much. I wish I had some kind of French expression to say.
Let's do a handshake.
Like a secret handshake or just a...
Bye, guys. Just a regular handshake. Something to do, a ritual, a piece of witchcraft.
Wow.